Have you imagined what the luckiest day of your life could be, would be, or how it would feel? Or if you could ever have that day? But what is luck? Have, why don't you have it? When we think about that luck, what if there wasn't any luck? What if there was only alignment? What if you were aligned? And what if you didn't need to rely on luck? All you had to do was rely on aligning with who you were meant to be, meaning your authentic self. And so I know that that is true because, see, today is Friday the 13th, and it is the luckiest day of my life because now I can say, wow, this is why I was born. My life is going to make a difference, and I'm going to leave this legacy, and it's going to be something wonderful. And everything that I went through in my life, now I understand it and it makes sense. And now I can get up excited because I know what I'm going to do, and I'm no longer afraid, and I'm not letting the fear and the doubt just hold me back and stop all of that. And so now I can really be joyous and live a really great life, and that is why this is the best day of my life. And it could be that for you as well, because I'm telling you that's what you can achieve. Because I know that's true, because that was the life that I lived, and that was me accepting that today. Seriously, because I couldn't. I didn't know it was there. You don't either. When we come into the world, we have to develop. That is our soul's path, our life purpose, or whatever it is, and everyone has one. Mine was to bring in a new philosophy during this time of great change in our world so that I could tell you that you're supposed to have this wonderful, incredible life, and all you have to do is move through all your restrictions, your doubts, your limitations, and all the stuff that I went through, and you don't have to do that anymore, and then we evolve and you have this great life. That is how it works. But see, accepting that is the difficulty that we all have. It's that lack of self-belief. And I can talk about it because I had tons of it. This is I'm 74. I want you to understand that. And today I am accepting. This is the luckiest day of my life. That was always weird that I would pick Friday the 13th. I've always known that I was supposed to be this different person. So are you. And that's our difficulty as well. Accepting that. Accepting your greatness. And I know that you have it because that was the life that I was meant to live. I just had a channeling session this morning with someone. It was just a half-hour private channeling session. And so what I do, and you'll understand this in a second. So what I do when they set up the appointment, they give me their birth date and some questions, something that they want Wilhelm to answer. And I look at that, and then I tune in because their birthday gave me something. It gave me an understanding of their life journey at this time in our world. And that could never have made sense to me or probably a lot of other people before, but now I'm seeing it. And so then I went in to my messages and I followed along being guided, and I picked out her birthday message from 2012. That's where I was guided to start then. But then they sent me to 2020, and then it went to another message and a different one. And then I said, I don't know what any of this means, and I'll see what it happens for her. And so then when we got into the session, I read it all to her, and I said, did that make any sense? And she said, absolutely all of it. There's an alignment in the universe that we tap into, and when you do that, you're living your life in your authentic self. Now, you couldn't probably not have done that before because we move through times in our civilization where things change. We know how we've developed certain ways of living and understanding things. I've spoken of Carl Jung for so much because he talked about synchronicity. I didn't understand that that's what I was receiving, a synchronistic way of understanding who you are, a guide, and that's exactly what it was. But there was a message today, and I never know when this is going to happen. I just want you to understand that because you'll hear that in some of the channeling sessions that you might listen to. I'm doing another one this Sunday, which is a powerful one because it's a full moon, and we have the ability to move to a new dimension of who we can become individually and also collectively, meaning our world, because that is what's happening. We just takes a while for us to understand that. But the message today was that none of you believed. That means all of us. When we come into the world, we have the ability to really manifest whatever we want, but we have to learn those skills. It's not that anyone has more than you. And if you listen to a Wilhelm session, they have you this one I just listened to. It says, touch yourself. Now, what would make you any less than another person? And what would make you any more? And they said, when you can answer that question, then you have balanced your life and you know why you're existing in the world now, and you're going to do something really great. It made no sense to me when I first heard it, just like many things don't make sense when we first hear them. Wilhelm gave us a couple of messages last year about Barbenheimer, and I go, what does that mean? And they explained it later. It means that you're moving through a change in the world, and so you need to look at individuals in a different way. And so Barbie, the movie Barbie, said, we need to evolve, and that's why they made that movie. And then Oppenheimer was saying, well, no, you might want to make different choices so you don't create more huge bombs that you just keep killing more of your civilization. All of that came through in all of the Wilhelm channeling sessions, and I keep pulling them up and finding them and sharing them with others because it's timeless wisdom, so it helps you whenever you might hear them. But I'm going to share something with you today from the message because I'm going to talk about it because I want to talk about your journey. We're all the same as humans. All we do is we're presented with things and we decide whether or not we're going to believe it and then integrate it into our being and then start to act on it and manifest something. There's no difference, except that sometimes we stop ourselves. And I did, but that's self-sabotage. When you hear that term self-sabotage, all that means is that you have decided that you're not going to take that step into the next unknown place of who you are and who you could become, because that's that potential that is always unlimited. And I've seen that one. I know it really well. But let's look at the message for today, and I'm just going to talk about it because they were explaining this process of our evolution, your evolution individually and our world. It's a consciousness that we all accept. And this is what that message said. So I was guided to put this up last night, and today I knew why, because it was taking that next step into self-belief and understanding. But the message was, none of you believe. We said you were moving through a massive restructuring of your life and world. We told our messenger we had given you a guide, and if more of you were to follow it, you would live great lives and manifest a beautiful world. Then we said you didn't always hear us, even though we have been consistent and provided guidance on certain dates throughout your linear time, for we wanted you to appreciate how you create your reality and world. We will give you a title for December 13th of other years, and you will be much more prepared for your full moon and our conversation. So it goes back to 2008, and many people might know there was an energetic shift that happened in 2008. So there is a consistency of energies in our universe. We just interpret them as we live, as humans. That's what we're figuring out now and how they affect us. But there are energies. That's all that it is. Every thought you hold is creative. Hold means where you place your attention, backed by emotion. The emotion acts as a fuel of sorts, which moves through those thoughts forward to create that very manifestation. I also want you to understand, I did another research because there's more information coming about, and as you appreciate the what you might have witnessed in your life or in the world or the different emotions, we know that those energies have an effect on our body. My mind-body healing had to come through me dealing with all of those emotions of anger and hatred and all that, because they've been ingrained and they just debilitate us. Forget about what you might think about in the world, but just about you. It's about this. Your life is your journey, and it's about you understanding your importance, and it's always a process. And especially now, because we're moving through a generational change, so people don't want to change, and you'll be deciding if that's going to be you. Then it goes back, it just shows how we evolve. Everything is consciousness again. Okay, there are no secrets, merely moments in time where you believe you have kept something hidden from yourself. That's what we do, and I tried it for years, so I do understand it. In the next year, you are always seeking your own acknowledgement. You have spent much of your time and effort seeking the acknowledgement of others or from your world in order that, in a sense, you may grant yourself permission to give yourself your own acknowledgement. And again, that is all that you're looking for. That's all any of us want, is to acknowledge who we are. And that's a process that you move through in your ascension process or your self-actualization. Everything you do also comes with what you might think of as a hidden benefit. That benefit is always something that causes you to expand in some manner. I've been through enough things in my life that I know that is absolutely true, because every horrible thing that went on, I always found that benefit, but I had to become willing to look for it. And sometimes you can't do it because you're just so in the depth of the despair, but when you come out of it, you always find it. Okay. Then this one, which is so wonderful, and I heard someone talking about this morning. So this was so interesting, and a little some reading or something like talking about being calm, which is perfect for today. Your calm approach to whatever you attempt to do, accomplish, or become will always enable you to do that much more easily, effective, and as well as efficiently. Your hurried, worried, or anxious approach will yield precisely the opposite results. And then for next year, let's go for that. It's a year ahead, okay? The best is always still in front of you. And that becomes your experience more and more when you decide to actively seek it. The best is whatever that means for you. Even though that is a very subjective word, you always know what that means and feels like for you. More of you will believe in yourselves on Sunday, including our message. And I think that was supposed to be messenger, but you get the idea. And I never know when that's going to happen. We live in this consciousness that is always expanding. I'm just going to tell you, in 1989, when I first sat down and received my first Wilhelm writing, it was just kind of surprising to me. And I wasn't going to tell people, but I knew that it was giving me information like that, because everything is your consciousness. It's mindset. That's all that it is. And so, but Wilhelm was giving me something from the cosmic consciousness, meaning that it was every single person matters. And for me to come to understand that, I had to heal. I had to know that the philosophy worked, and it was my entire life. And I went back, and then 8 years ago, they had me go back and said, let's go back and review, which is what I do with all my clients, because then you start to realize how brilliant you are. You start to find the things that were within you that you didn't know. And so I put a lot of it, because nothing that's happening in our world is accidental. As I said that the other day. Nothing in your life is happening that way. We just don't always understand it. And sometimes you might not even study it, because that's when we run. We don't want to see certain things. As Carl Jung said, we stick our heads in the sand, we don't want to do the shadow work. Well, I had to do all of it. And as a society, as a civilization, that's what we're supposed to do. But not everyone will do that, especially at this time in our world. But I was meant to bring in something that was going to be more inclusive for all people, you see, because that's how civilization evolves over time, where we start to understand that we don't really need to separate ourselves or others, because then we form a collective consciousness that certain people aren't enough. And then guess what? You can't get to be any better because you're carrying it around. We all carry collective consciousness. It affects us because it'll say we can do this or we can't. That's all. But we are the ones who, whenever we happen to be there, we're supposed to say, no, we can do more. But what will happen? You won't believe yourself. I did that, so I do understand. Because you'll hear in the video from 3 years ago, Wilhelm is saying very clearly that we gave you everything that you could need to live a really successful life and create a wonderful world. And the only difficulty will be you won't believe it. That is exactly it. I didn't believe it. I couldn't understand how I had received all these messages and how they were aligned and how they healed my life. It made no sense. And so then you will look at that and say, wait, that doesn't make sense either. Because we all have cognitive dissonance. And if you don't know what that is, you should study it, because it'll help you understand everything that has happened. But I also wrote a lot about it, and I've put it in all of my articles, but I just want to show you that because it'll make much more sense. Nothing that I'm saying now is new. It's just that accepting it for me and you hearing it and accepting it will be new. But that's what happens every single day. But today will be different because it's the luckiest day of my life. But let me show you this. So if you go to rogerburnley.com and you click on articles, you can go back to the very earliest one. And this is where I started talking about what we would be moving through and what the best thing to do to build a much better world, a much better human, is if we can recognize what we've had within us. Now, people thought this doesn't make sense, why I would be writing about this, but that is because most of us don't accept that we've been these eternal beings, and so we've had all kinds of things implanted within us, every single soul. But unless we decide to move through them or send them, then, and if we don't acknowledge them and look at them, that's why I wrote the article. And then I had to talk about, I knew that I was holding back. You've done the same thing. But my life was a little different, but I knew this was coming through. I knew why you were born. I wrote that in 2022. And then your destiny is before you, because I saw that I could start seeing everyone's destiny when I started allowing that mystic side to come through and accepting that I was a prophet. That was a challenge. And then here's what's happening in life and world. Because I knew that. I feared success in myself, and you might be doing the same thing, because the only way that we don't become successful in our own life is when we don't take the steps into our authentic self, and that's a journey. And then I told you about the program, and I told you again why you were here, and I said you could save the world because everybody has that ability. I spent several months in a dark room. I wanted to talk about the ascension process because I had more dark nights of the soul than anyone can imagine, so I do know how you move through them and how you get better. But that was the path I was given. You might remember why you are alive. That is a process that we move through. I could never fit in or feel that I belonged. We all feel that. And so your job is to get over that and own yourself. And then the next ones, I didn't want to be me. I had to say that because what happened when I discovered this ability, which I tried to keep hidden for so long, I thought, I can't handle it. I can't take all these, I can't work with these people because it's going to be too much, because I can see who they are and what they're supposed to do. But then I realized that that was a false fear, because most people wouldn't believe it, so they won't even come to find out. So it doesn't matter. But I had to acknowledge my gift, as you will at one point. And you only want 3 things, and that's the same thing for every single person. And if you can get this one, you will understand yourself and everyone else. You are only seeking acknowledgement, acceptance, and approval, just like everyone else. So then I decided to give up suffering. That's when you own yourself again. But I knew I was still doing the self-sabotage, because then what I did is I'm not going to tell people. So I didn't do any marketing. I'm not going to make my YouTube. I'm not going to let anyone see any of this. That's what we do. The world according to Wilhelm. But then I knew another time, I said the other day, I thought, wow, I could become richer than Elon because I could become a billionaire. If you discover something that's going to help transform the world, and wouldn't that be worth a lot of money? And I go, that's true. Getting people to believe it is a whole different thing, which again is why Wilhelm gave us so many messages about you didn't believe Jesus, Buddha, or Tesla, or us, basically. And you will find this. It is so miserable. The hardest thing you will find in your life is repressing who you're becoming. Because it's always evolving, every single human. But what we will do is then resist, and then our lives get worse. That's what happens in the world as well. Okay, and then I wanted to tell you about the philosophy, because I knew it had turned into that. And I looked up that meaning of philosophy, and it's like the study of and answering questions about the existence. Well, I answered those questions. So it must have been a philosophy, because it causes you to live better, and anyone who might use it, they would live a better life, and then eventually we have this better world. That's the only way that it happens. But when I saw that what Wilhelm had given me, and you will see this because I put it all up in my YouTube channels, in this description, several different days of the consistency of the synchronicity of messages that change your brain. That's all. And then we started moving through the world changing, and I knew everything that was happening, and no one was talking about it because we were afraid. So I wrote that article to talk about it. Life Coaching for a New World. That's where I knew I had to change. Then this one is probably the greatest article you will read. The Big Light could make our transition more challenging. Now, because I wanted to talk about historical changes that had happened, And when you read it, you'll see we've gone through this before, and the way that we come out is when we start knowing our truth. That's what happens every single time. And if you study history, you'll see all of that. Um, and this is true. I had to come to that. And I still couldn't let go of it. All suffering and struggle you continue to experience are self-imposed, only because you're not willing to own yourself or take the steps and move through the trauma, because that's what we all have. And getting you to understand you are perfect is really another thing. Now, this one you will love because it shows the synchronicity. Because there's several messages over November 23rd. You'll wonder, how could that have happened? There's organization in the universe, and there's so many others here that you can read. An Ascension Guide for the New World, and it's all there. What I'm saying is that I've spent years putting this together, and now I'm going to change, because years ago, when this was coming about, people were saying you should be charging $5,000. This is so great. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. One of the things that I have is that I just think I'm going to help everyone. Well, now I can, because see, anyone can come into this work because anyone can afford it. The only reason you won't is that you're already doing what you know you want to do, and you're happy and fine. That's great. You wouldn't want to do it. But if you're not doing that, then you're going to see, oh, I just don't want to become my best self. And I can say that because I know it's true. I can talk to people all day long about you can really move through this, and you have something within you that you're meant to develop and all of that. And no, that's not possible. That's why in that article, you will see why I talked about cognitive dissonance so much, because we all have it. I had it. I couldn't believe that I could have done this and I didn't know. That is why you were born. You can't know what you're going to do. It has to develop. But it's our fear that keeps us from going there, which is also why I wrote the book, Overcoming Fear, Guide to Freedom, because that is what happened. And I'm going to show you one other thing, because the transition that has have happened over the last several years, Wilhelm had given us all the information so you would understand what was happening for you and what we might be seeing in the world. But it's different when we look back at it now in hindsight, because that's how we learn. That's how we see things. But this is the little message from that day. And I'll leave these links in the description in case you want to read them later. I just did this the other day, but think of your life, your brain, your consciousness as being this thing that grows, it expands over time. Now think about our collective consciousness doing the same thing. And that is what occurs, which is why our world looks different than it did many, many years ago. And so the way that Wilhelm gave me information over the years was in alignment with that collective consciousness, or what we could accept, but to understand what was happening. And so in 2020, my message has changed. And this is the first one that came through that started telling me, because they always give me information beforehand, telling me what we would be moving through and how we could also change it all. And it said, you were afraid to love. First, we're speaking to each person individually and your world collectively, primarily due to the current world conditions and the events in the United States. We have given you several messages on this subject, but we will summarize here. Love is the most powerful force that exists. It is powerful because it does not restrict its energy. It does not limit its energy, and continues to expand because love is the presence of all judgment. If each of you comes to understand and accept this concept, you and your world will evolve exponentially. There are other aspects about that message, and some of them have been published, but when I first started receiving these, it took me a long time to write them because it made me uncomfortable. But then I knew I had to move forward because I was seeing what was going on in the world and what people would not have maybe understood, and I was getting it. Your father is quite proud of you. That is talking about this generational change that we're moving through, and the changes of energies. And men are the ones during this time who needed to maybe accept more of their feminine energy, and we're seeing that has not gone really well with the changes. But those are the struggles that we move through in changes of civilization. And so the feminine energy needed to be embodied more by all of us, and women needed to become more empowered. And that is the dance that we're moving through right now, globally, everywhere. Why are you angry? The only reason we are ever angry is because we are refusing to change. We will think it's about something out there in the world, but no, we have the ability within us to change. But when we don't do it, then we get really angry. Then, this one was when I was questioning everything. And it says, the more you know, the less you understand. And it took me a long time to even understand what that meant, that first sentence. But when we think that we know everything, how could we learn anything more? And so even when I'm receiving this information, which was done in a completely different way, people couldn't accept it because that doesn't make any sense. Because they haven't seen it before. How could I have done this? I didn't believe it either, because how could I have healed everything that people told me it was impossible? And I did a video, you'll hear that, where I talked about the reason I listened to Napoleon Hill's, because he wouldn't use the word impossible. We all do. Wilhelm gave us a message the other day saying utopia is attainable. But see, we will hear that and think, no, couldn't do it for us because we can't. That's just a limiting belief that we have accepted. Anyway, understanding your past may help you accept your present. And this is when they wanted to tell us that you don't have to run from your past. And that's what we have done individually. And that's what we have done in nations. We don't want to look at the things that happened before. Then how can you change anything? How can you correct anything if you're not willing to look at it? If you're just going to cover it up and pretend it didn't exist? And that's what we've done. We've done individually, and then we've done it in our world, which is why Wilhelm said we needed to change, which was a restructuring. And then this is really interesting. They talked about my little outburst because they were going to talk about we're going to go through periods. Many of you probably have done it already, but we're in a different period now, which is why they're saying we can start taking another step because we've done all of this, you see, in our consciousness if we're willing to recognize it. Then August 31st. This is where they talked about some of the other changes, and this was about the United States and black women. When we saw that here in the U.S. we had a Kamala Harris who was running for president at that time, and we were all kind of really shocked, except Wilhelm told us that was the changes that we were going to see, and if we were to really progress as humankind, then we want to embrace more and understand more. And I was given a way for us to understand more. And in the beginning, when I started receiving this information, I thought, I've always felt I was supposed to do something, but what was it in the world? We're supposed to make that difference. Well, this is it. And that's why this is the luckiest day of my life, and it could be yours as well. Because I can tell you there's nothing that holds you back except your disbelief of who you could become. That's it. That's all that it is, because now we have the tools to move through it because we know how it happens. We have things that have been implanted within us that don't serve us. We know how to use our neuroscience and change it. We just have to be consistent, and Wilhelm gave me a plan, and it worked because I got healed. You can do the same thing. So please check out all the information. Come to the channeling session on Sunday. You'll learn so much more. Check out the work. And again, it will always be available. It'll just be a lot more next year. You can achieve anything. See you soon.